DeLisa Guerrier is the managing partner of Guerrier Development, a multi-billion-dollar real estate and construction company that she founded with her husband that is focused on family, improving overlooked neighborhoods, and creating economic opportunity where there was once none. In our conversation today, we discuss the power of the written word, saying yes to the unexpected detours on life's journey, and how one question from her then fiance changed the course of her life and his, and is today reshaping the architectural landscape of Nashville, Tennessee, and beyond. Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform where story by story, we explore the resiliency of the human spirit with people who are using their own personal journeys to leave a positive and transformative imprint on our world today. At the Podium holds a space for meaningful conversation, inspiration, and life. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with DeLisa Guerrier. Mrs. Guerrier is the managing partner of construction, creative direction, and hospitality for Guerrier Development. She is a graduate of historic Tennessee State University and a native of Northern California. She entered the real estate market in Nashville shortly after the 2008 crash and immediately turned her attention to the entrepreneurial side of the field. Mrs. Guerrier is one of the few Black women in the state licensed as a general contractor for commercial, residential, and industrial development. Mrs. Guerrier guides Guerrier Development's vision for communities, as well as driving its social mission to invest in emerging neighborhoods. She is an active member of Nashville's philanthropic community, focusing on the needs of children. She is also the driving force behind the company's entry into the hospitality vertical and has forged global partnerships at the executive level across the world. DeLisa, welcome to At the Podium.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It is such an honor to have you on the show today. You and your husband are trailblazing in some really amazing spaces. And I'm very happy to have you on to talk about the work that you all are doing in construction, hospitality, reading, some major parts of the human life. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you again.
So I wanted to start with an article that you wrote for Forbes magazine this past April. You were writing about how you're navigating the sort of uncertainty around real estate today. And you talk about issues like the feds increasing or not increasing the rates. You talk about access to capital. You talk about global insecurities. It's all of these different storms that are sort of converging around the real estate market, which you are a big, big player in. And then in the article, you recount the story of a drive that you and your sister took with your mother from the Bay Area to your school in Tennessee at Fisk. So the setup is your mom is in one car.
That's right.
You and your sister are in the car following. And as you're driving through Oklahoma and Texas in the summer, we all know about those thunderstorms that happen.
Yes.
You guys get caught in this really big storm.
Mhm.
And so you call your mom and you're like, hey, are we pulling over? Because you're seeing all the other cars pulling over because the rain's getting so bad. And this is what your mother says. She says, no, we're going to keep going. We take our time, we pay attention, we move cautiously, but we keep going through the storm. And then after the storm subsides, you call her back on the phone. It's like, hey, are you good? You're okay. And she says, you see, we're out of the storm now. But if we had stopped, we would still be in it. And I love this story for so many reasons. The first thing, and this may be a bit obscure, but it reminded me of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God moment. You
Yes.
know, in chapter 18 of that book, they're in towards the end of the book, they're in this big hurricane down in Florida. And Hurston writes, she says, the wind came back with triple fury and put out the light for the last time. They sat in company with the others in other shanties, their eyes straining against the crude walls and their souls asking if he meant to measure their puny might against his. They
Mm,
seemed to be staring at the dark, but their eyes were watching God.
yes.
Right. And then the storm becomes the event in the book. It's sort of like this, it's literally a storm that sort of breaks open the rest of the story and leads to what I think is some of the most beautiful writing in literature about, Hurston describes Janie, who's the main character of the book and the focus, pulling the horizon into her and wrapping it around her like a fishing net. And so you get to that beautiful moment through this really difficult storm in the book. And so my first question for you is, were you intentionally referencing Zora Neale Hurston when you wrote this article? And then I was just wondering, what other really interesting lessons have you learned from your mom?
Oh my goodness. Let me answer the first one first. No, I was not referencing Zora Neale Hurston, but what an incredible parallel. It is the when you talk about the power of storytelling
Mm.
and the power of just tenacity and persistence. But my mother is a wealth of really all the reasons why I am here, you know. And just a little bit about her. She had my sister and I when she was 19 and 21 and young and newly divorced and having to deal with raising two daughters in Oakland, California. And so she said, what is it that I can do that a man can do to take care of his family and doesn't have to rely on a second income? And so she became a pile driver. So if you don't know what that is, a pile driver, I say my mom builds bridges. And if she can build a bridge, then I can build anything. And so she worked for the Port of San Francisco for a while. She still does. And she does welding. But if you can imagine what that did to a 9-year-old version of me, seeing my mother go out, come home with steel toe boots on, Carhartts, and come in the house and cook dinner and be a mother. It took away these borders, these barriers of women fit in this category or they can only do this. She has just been a wealth of lessons just watching her every day.
I mean, now I'm starting to put together the pieces of
Yes.
what you and your husband are doing today. Because I was in my mind, I was like, how did we get to this
Yeah.
aspect of what you're doing? I think we all, especially Black people, the mother is so essential. The mother
Mm-hmm.
figure is so essential to what the rest of the story looks like for us. And
That's right.
I think it's a powerful image of your mother building bridges, literally building bridges and building a life for you and your sister.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly impactful. I remember when, a little bit about, my development career and to tie it all in. Back when I first started in real estate development, I would hire builders to come build for me.
Yeah.
And after a while, I realized I was paying for other people to make mistakes. I said, well, my husband and I said, if we're going to pay for somebody else to make a mistake, we may as well pay for ourselves. So I decided at that time I was going to go and take the 9-hour test to become licensed. And I remember that morning, I was questioning myself. I was questioning whether I could do it. I called my mom and she said, DeLisa, you have everything you need to have to take the step in front of you. Everything that you need, you have it. Go do it.
Mhm.
And I just remember that moment also being this pinnacle in my life for everything coming forward. That if the step is in front of me, I have everything I need to take it. And so, anyway, I became one of the very few Black women licensed in Tennessee for industrial, commercial, and residential construction.
It's so funny that you mentioned that quote from your mother because on your Instagram account, there is a beautiful picture of you with that quote. I had to read it like 2 or 3 times to really understand what you were saying.
Yes,
That if the road appears in front of you, you have everything that you need to
exactly.
step onto the road. Because how many times do we, in my own life, I've done it like, oh, I don't know, and maybe it's not the right thing. But if the road appears, you have it.
And it's time.
It's
Yeah.
time. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of time
Mhm.
and you getting that license and going into development and construction, I've been in hospitality for about 30 years now, maybe a little less. And I have been on countless sites, been in countless meetings with construction teams, architects on the field in the construction hat and the vest with the teams who are laboring out there building one nail at a time, beautiful buildings.
Yes.
Two things that I do not see a lot of in those spaces. One, I don't see many Black people of any kind in
Hmm.
any level in the process. And two, Black women virtually non-existent in these spaces for a host of reasons. But I'm wondering how you began this journey.
Wow. You're absolutely right. The representation in this space is very challenged. It became apparent to me a long time ago when I first started, but I was biology pre-med at Fisk University, and I met my husband my second year there. And my husband he has this entrepreneur spirit like you've never seen before. He's from Haiti. He grew up as a farmer and came to the US when he was 13 and really just took advantage of the opportunity in front of him. So he went out in the automotive business and started from nothing, from washing cars, and grew a pretty amazing automotive company that I later joined him to work with him in. And when I was headed to medical school, he said to me, he said, "Why would you go and be a doctor when you could own the hospital?" And at first, I thought that was a really good line to not make me leave. Uh, but of course, I absolutely love physicians to this day and still wonder what my life would have been like if I took that path. But what it did was it opened up a part of my brain to see entrepreneurship and what it meant to step into working for myself. And that's what I did. We grew that company pretty substantially in a short amount of time. And I needed to do something for myself because the automotive world was all him. I needed something that I love. So I got into real estate by helping families. It
Mm.
was families who would come into his automotive facility and they needed help. This was right after the downturn. They were in 13 or 17% interest rates. They were about to, be foreclosed on or their home was about to have to be short sold. And I looked at the opportunity and just figured out how I could help. So I paid these people's mortgage, moved them out, renovated their home, and the profit that was made, we either split it or I paid them enough upfront where that fundraised for the real estate development company. I never saw it coming, but it was really having the heart to do something good for someone that opened up this massive door that I never even had in my perspective. And so we started small, doing small little infill projects, building 2 homes or 4 homes or small little pocket neighborhoods like 16 units or 30 units. That allowed the community where we developed in to trust us, to see what the quality of what we built, and to know that when the Guerriers come in this area, it's to plant something that's going to help the community. And that's what we've developed a reputation for. And then we started expanding into a lot larger projects, big multifamily projects and things like that. So that's a little bit of the journey.
There's something interesting. You keep hearkening back to it that when that road appeared, you saw the need, you addressed the need, and then the residuals of that led to what you're able to do today around your theme park that you're building, which we'll talk about, and
Yes.
your hospitality ventures that you're working on that we're going to talk about. There's something that comes up in the world that I exist in. And I think in many spaces where you start to see people of color, you start to see women start to excel and move into the higher reaches, entrepreneurship and owning businesses, where the higher up you go, the fewer of women, people of color that you see. There's still that sort of shedding that happens, which makes it interesting because the higher up you go in any organization, the necessity for representation and what you represent becomes really, really, really important for the people who are coming up behind you to look up and see someone who is there. And that's a theme that has come up in other episodes of the show. But I wanted to talk to you because I read a book by a woman named Stephanie Johnson, and I want to read the title to get it right. It's called Inclusify: The Power of Uniqueness and Belonging to Build Innovative Teams. And in the book, I believe she's a Hispanic woman, and she talks about how very innovative and successful companies do this very well, that they take people and give them seats at the table who would not normally be included at that table.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about this in terms of you being in the construction and the development space. But the interesting part is that oftentimes the people who are seated at these tables who have been asked to join or who have earned those seats at the table don't feel comfortable there. They
Mhm.
actually sometimes feel tokenized, and oftentimes they feel shut down because they're the first or they're one of the first in whatever these spaces are. And I talked to a woman on this show, and we were talking about this. She's a Black woman in the keynote speaking business, and we were talking about this. And her response, which has stuck with me, this is a long-winded question. I'm sorry. I'll get to the point in a minute.
Oh.
She said that even if you feel those things, feel them. It's
Mm,
real. It's your experience. And still speak up,
mm,
still be at the table. And
that's
this message was repeated on another call that I did with a woman who I went to Vanderbilt with, and we are Nashville adjacent to each other. You were at Fisk, I was at Vanderbilt. She went to Vanderbilt with me. She rose very high in for different companies like American Express, et cetera. And so she sits on boards. And we were talking about this same phenomenon of people being the first and breaking glass ceilings and feeling not really imposter syndrome, but feeling they're not welcome there. And her response was the same thing. It doesn't matter if you feel that way. You still have to participate and show up and be there. So
mm.
my question is, so when you and your husband are in these spaces, how are you dealing with that? How are you comfortably or with discomfort sitting in these spaces where you're sitting, where you probably are the first?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big question. And I will say that the previous people that you have answered very, very well. I want to say that my dynamics may be a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
because in the real estate development world, although it is corporate, it is something we created. And I don't want to say I created the table because the truth is we're sitting at tables, with family offices and private capital and like pretty massive other groups. And it is it's a little bit of different dynamic, I think, than what they experience in a corporate world, but also still can be a little uncomfortable because you're absolutely right that there aren't many of us. And I think the way that I've been blessed to marry a husband from Haiti, where he didn't grow up knowing black and white. He
Yes.
only knew rich and poor.
Right.
And now imagine coming from Fisk University, where, this is the first historically black college after slavery. And
Yeah.
things that you understand and are made aware of during that matriculation through it changes some things for you mentally, but to also understand where my husband has come from and to see his mindset and how far that has allowed him to grow from. It's not that you don't focus on it, it's that there are bigger things, there's other things to focus on, and the fact that I'm sitting at this table means that I am representation for someone else and can help someone else and can lead, they can learn from the lessons that I have learned from and not have to pay the same price. And
Mm.
that's where my focus goes and pushes forward. But it's uncomfortable to be anywhere you haven't been,
Yeah.
most of the time. And so it's a journey.
And still you must go
Exactly.
there.
Exactly. And one of my absolute favorite quotes that I have to remind myself every day was from Les Brown. And Les Brown said, if it's hard, we're going to just do it hard. And, that's what I think when I go into these meetings. If it's hard, just do it hard. Show up and just do it.
Just do it. Just show up. What is it? Show up and show out. Not really
That's
show out, but
yeah.
you know what I'm saying. You mentioned Fisk and the sort of the legacy that Fisk holds in America and for Black people. You went to two HBCUs, Fisk and Tennessee State.
Right.
And it's been interesting because over the last maybe 4 or 5 months, HBCUs are getting a lot of play again because the cast of A Different World has been very much publicly going to all these different HBCUs and really pumping up that experience and the importance of that type of education for Black people,
Yeah.
honestly. And I didn't go to an HBCU, but I can imagine what that's like to be in a space of your peers, complexities and all, but what that's like to be in the space of your peers
Mhm.
as you're learning and the sort
Yeah.
of perspectives that you get. And I wonder how you would say your HBCU experience was and how it shaped you and your view of how you work and live today.
Yes, that's a great question. So I will say that growing up in Northern California, I ended up going to high school in a small little town called Manteca. I think it was maybe 7 Black people in the school.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate is leaving there and going to an HBCU. It allowed me to be confident in any room, right? I had this high school experience where I was able to make friends, relate, and carry myself in a room and several rooms where people didn't look like me and had different mindsets. And then moved to a place like Fisk and TSU where everyone, looked like me. And the experience was incredible. But what I do feel like I had 2 different experiences at both colleges. Fisk is this very intimate setting where everyone feels like family. I remember being at Fisk and there were conversations around of, hey, let's go to this party. And someone's like, we have to go to the library first. Come with us. There's this pulling of let's go up together. Let's make it to where we need to go. We could party later. TSU was a little bit different experience, but I appreciated both. And what both of them taught me was how to network. Both of them taught me, and I think that that's something that we don't prepare our children for going into college is to really prepare to learn to meet people, talk to everyone, ask questions, build relationships, because you never know when you'll need something or someone else will need something from you. And that's the purpose of what we're going into next. It's been incredible to reach into my Rolodex of just friends that I went to college with, and I can almost get anything in any industry from friends from college. So
There's something powerful in that. And as you were talking, it made me think, you said that we were oftentimes not socialized around that kind of, asking for what you need. And I think one thing that my mother did, and it sounds like your mom did too, was really drove home the fact that you belong in any room, you
yes.
know, and that you can sit at any table and also don't come home with anything really below an A or a B. Like you don't just get to you don't just get that by, just cause, but
Yeah.
meaning that you better show up and do the work.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I was interviewing a guy who was a football player. He went to Yale a few years before me,
Uh-huh.
and he was talking about raising his kids. And he said it almost sort of casually, that he takes his sons to the bank with him. He's opened accounts for them. He's teaching them to be financially responsible. And you put in, then you can take out all these little tiny micro lessons, right?
Yes.
That help you build the character of who you are as an adult and the habits that you have as an adult. And it's
Yes.
something that we as Black people or people who are first generation Americans, people who are immigrants, to start building those types of teaching models for our kids, our nieces, our nephews, our younger cousins is really
Yes.
important.
100%. There are 2 lessons I learned from my stepfather that I believe really helped shape me into what I've become. One of them was, and this is something I've instilled as a parent myself. My children do not get allowances. And I remember growing up, my dad said to me, I'm not going to pay you to make your bed or clean your room. When you get older, nobody's going to pay you to do that. I took it a step further and I told my children, I said, you know, I'm not going to pay you to help out around the house or to do something around the house. But what I will pay you to do is read a book. And so we have a whole chart of the type of books and how much money they get paid for each. Because the truth is, the more that they feed themselves knowledge, wisdom, understanding, these things will then pay them. And so that was one lesson that was instilled in me probably accidentally. The other was when I was 12 years old. I used to go on these walks with my stepdad. And one day I asked him, I said, how much money is a lot of money? And it was at this moment, as you think about at 12 years old, that you are shaping where you're going, what looks like success for you as you grow up, as you get into your teenage years. And I will say, we didn't have much, but his answer changed the course of my life. He said, baby, a lot of money is when you don't know how much money you have. Now, if you can think of what would have happened if he would have told me $100,000 or $200,000 or $1,000,000 is a lot of money, it would have set these limits in my mind for what it was that I was going to go achieve. And so I took that, what he said, and it has been, my husband said, well, what's comfortable for us? I said, don't know yet, but just keep going. We're just going to keep going until we get there. And so here, I'm in my 30s still and have been able to grow a pretty substantial real estate portfolio and development company that we've got, a couple $1 billion worth of projects just that we're working on. And so it was a pinnacle moment.
Mm.
Yeah.
You also mentioned just a moment ago that you pay your kids to read, which I kind of think is brilliant. And you have talked about how in our conversation prior to this call, you talked about how reading really opened your imagination and that reading was this idea of possibility, which ties in beautifully to Storyville Gardens.
Yes.
Which you're going to tell us what that is. But I have to tell you, I was so excited about Storyville Gardens because reading was very important to me. And I read still books, I turn
Yes.
pages and the whole thing.
You do have to differentiate
Yeah,
that
you have
now.
to differentiate. Like I can read on a Kindle or my laptop, whatever. But when we talked about Storyville Gardens, I got really excited because you were almost the way we get excited about going to ride the roller coaster. You're creating that exact same experience around reading, which honestly, reading is under attack in our country right now.
Yes.
Literature is
Yes.
under attack in our country right now. So that you are doing this with the help of some really great people like Mel McGowan, who
Yes.
for Universal and Disney and Marvel.
Yes.
Can you talk about what that is, what Storyville Gardens is, and why you are doing this?
Absolutely. Oh, this is one of the highlights of my life. So I grew up, as you said, growing up in Oakland, it wasn't a lot to get into that was positive. And so thankfully, my grandmother, she was a writer, and I would sit and I would watch her read a book this thick, in a day and a half. And I would be fascinated. I'd sit at the bottom of her bed and I'm like, tell me about the book. And she would tell me. I couldn't comprehend how she could read that quickly and be that into a book. And so I start picking them up myself. And I do think that after a lot of my research with Storyville Gardens, that's the one thing that's missing is that children don't see us read, which is why they're not reading. But to go back, so I developed this just really deep love for reading. During high school, my lunch hour would be with a book. I wouldn't be in groups of people. I would sit at the table with a book and dive in. So later, I moved to Tennessee, had 3 children at the time. I have 4 now. And what I was finding was that in order to find any sort of family fun, we would go to the movies or we would have to drive to Atlanta or to Chicago and I told my husband, I said, we should just build this small little park, just something, maybe 8 acres in the center of the city. And it mimicked this park I grew up going to called Fairyland in Oakland. Fairyland is based off of nursery rhymes and fairy tales. So the little woman who lived in a shoe and, all the Mother Goose stories, all that stuff. And at first he thought I was very crazy. And then finally one day he saw that I was not taking no for an answer, that I was moving forward with or without his consent. And so he jumped on board. But I went to this conference because I knew that to build a park, it needed to have some greater purpose. And they were talking about the literacy statistics in Tennessee. 4 out of 5 children are not up to grade level reading. I mean, and so if you really just allow that to sink in, that we have gotten so consumed with technology, with, everything else that we are forgetting about the fundamental thing that children need to get through the rest of their life. And so there was a study that shows that if we can just get children to read for fun, anything, I'm talking about the back of a cereal box, anything, if we can get them to read for fun, it will significantly impact their test scores.
Mm.
And so it was at that moment that it all clicked that we need to build a park based off books and stories from all over the world and design it with the intent to promote literacy. So we hired an incredible design firm that really helped me to not just develop the idea, but to really bring the whole concept to life. And that was Storyland Studios, which was led by Mel McGowan. And he was one of the lead designers of California Disneyland and has just done some amazing things throughout his career. He hopped on board and had coordinated with our local team and really brought it to life. So it's pretty incredible. So let me just give you just a quick picture of what this means. So a few Christmases ago, I bought my older son's the book series called Trapped in a Video Game. It's probably about a 8-book series set and, chapter books, nice size. And it's trapped in a video game. So they love video games. And so they started reading the series. And, after a few books, they put it down for a little while. So I called one of my illustrators. I said, draw a ride around this book. I just want to see what happens. So a few days later, he shares the images. I sit down. I have my boys sitting in the room. I open the computer. I said, look at this. Their eyes lit up. One of them started running. He said, the sand dunes, the claw. And it was at that moment that I realized that he saw physically what he imagined from reading a book. And I said, this is confirmation that we're on the right track. It actually caused them both to go pick up the rest of the book series and finish the book just by seeing that there's this experience that can come to life based off of something that they imagined from being in the story.
Do you at all have any sort of pause or trepidation about how politicized reading is and how that will impact what you're building there in Tennessee?
I don't. And I don't because it's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
When we're able to bring books to life and offer those books, to invite authors and illustrators to the park for festivals and just get children back engaged, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I have a former professor of mine from Vanderbilt. I believe she was the first Black woman to work in the English department at Vanderbilt, Dr. Professor Margaret Bass. She taught African American lit, and we've stayed in contact since my Vandy days and her Vandy days. And she says the biggest difference she sees in students today who come to the doors of the university where she teaches is that they haven't read books, that they don't even have a baseline of understanding because they just have not read books. And so that if you don't read books, you don't even have the gift of critical thinking.
That's right. That's it right there. That's it. Wow. Yes. Well, and we're so excited because with the size and the scale that Storyville is, it's one that we can pick up and replicate in other markets. The park is only 37 acres. So we're able to pick it up and bring other books and stories to life in other parts of the world. So we are really excited. And then outside of the theme park, we have a foundation called Storyville Gardens Literacy Foundation. And so we will be building literacy centers across the US.
So if Storyville Gardens wasn't enough, you are also now entering the wild, wild west of hotel development. So I can't wait to have conversations off this platform with you about all of that.
Yes.
Because that's a whole other, it's not an unfamiliar dynamic to you, but it's, the variables at play are quite interesting when you start building hotel spaces for people. So I wonder how you got hoodwinked into that.
Oh my goodness. And it's not just hotels, it's multifamily. It's a mix of all
Yes.
of them all in one space. And so you step in being a real estate developer, you look at the need in the market and you address that need. And that's what we've done. Sometime begrudgingly. My husband's now dragging me along into some of these developments, but yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing what you do in that space. I know it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I want to talk to you about success.
Mhm.
So in 2021, you became the youngest woman inducted into the Enterprising Women Hall of Fame.
By 30 years.
I mean, come on now.
I know.
How
Yeah.
amazing is that?
That's incredible. It's incredible. And, there's an amazing group of women who have rallied around each other, not for any other purpose, but to build each other up. Someone said to me, surround yourself with women who will speak your name at opportunity. And that's what I've done. That's what they've done. And it's been a really good ride.
What has been your biggest leap of faith in your life, career?
I would say the biggest was preparing to go to medical school and taking a leap to leave everything that I thought that I was going to go do almost in the blink of an eye for a man, and not for a man, but for a marriage, for a life that I didn't particularly foresee. I'd known him for 3 years, but was not dating him. We started dating about 2 months before I decided to take this leap. And so if you could imagine that, that was the biggest leap. But I would say that that was very, very, very much fueled by steps that weren't mine, that God really pulled me. And now it's things that I recognize about myself that I realize probably I would not have made the best position. But it was taking that leap that did it.
That is such a life lesson because so often we get stuck in a view of who we are and what we're supposed to be. And again, you said it in the first thing we talked about. When that road appears, it's appearing because you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
How often do we stand at closed doors and just knock on them? And then the open door is literally right where that door is. And we're just
Exactly.
like, I want this door.
Exactly. Exactly. And you never would have known that beyond this one, that was not what you planned and didn't look like what you thought it would look, is where your greatest joy will be.
Mm,
I will also say that taking that leap, there was something that I learned about the law of increasing return. And that law states that it doesn't matter where you are, put 110% of everything you have in it. And what you receive will be far greater than what you put out. In the development company, this is just an example. We built a custom home on the lake a while ago. And this is right at this pivotal point where we're going from, I'm praying about, we're going from these custom homes to these larger multifamily deals. You know, how do you understand that? So I got a phone call of someone down the street and they said, hey, we have a lot down the street and we can build a lake house on this lot. Would you consider building it for us? And so I looked at my husband. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this again. I've already told you we're not doing this anymore. And so he says, take the meeting and tell them, yes, we'll build it. And so I'm like, ugh. So I take the meeting. We get in the meeting with this gentleman and really find out that he's a developer as well, but he doesn't build custom homes. He only builds big multifamily developments. And so meeting with him, he says, if you could just help me because I don't know what to do with this single family. If you guys could do this, he said, I'm going to bring you and introduce you to my whole team and they'll teach you everything you want to know about multifamily. Do you get what I mean?
yeah.
The doors open in places you least expect when you put everything you have into it.
Mm.
Yeah.
In this season of the show, I'm exploring with the guests this idea of legacy. And that means something different to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
intentionally so, thank goodness. And I wonder for you, what do you think your legacy is or will be?
That's really good. So, what comes to mind is this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And to know that everything that we're doing it is a responsibility. We have a responsibility in everything that we touch to be so intentional because it is going to impact generations to come. And it's what we do right now, today, tomorrow, next week, that really shapes that. And that is legacy to me.
That's really powerful. It makes me think about Plessy versus Ferguson and
Mm,
Brown v. Board
yeah.
and the 1964-65 acts that were passed,
Yep.
that you and I would not be sitting on this call without
I know.
that legacy being planted then.
That's right.
Mm.
That's right.
DeLisa, thank you so much for this time today and this beautiful conversation. I'm completely honored and humbled to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. We all will leave a legacy. Choose and use yours wisely. Thank you. Thank you, DeLisa.
Thank you.